What's up, everybody? We're back with another video. So I was actually planning on waiting like exactly a week after the last video dropped just to make sure I got as many comments as possible. But I realized I'm going to be busy this whole weekend, so I'm gonna go ahead and do this now. It's Thursday at the moment. I don't know when I'm going to post this, but I just wanted to go through and respond to all of the comments on the first animation hour, because there were a lot of very large talking points and a lot of people had a lot to say. If future videos continue to have these kind of large responses from the audience, I'll probably do more videos like this where I take those comments and respond to them separately. Now, originally I was planning to do this as part of the next animation hour, but I figure there's so much here to talk about that it would just take a large portion of that time. So we made a separate video. Now then, I'm probably just going to go straight from the top in a chronological order of comment being posted, and we'll just read through them. I highly recommend sticking around till the end. The last comment definitely has the most to discuss and kind of counters almost every other comment before it, so this will be fun. Alright, first things first, we got Chibi Jitsu, the immediate response. It says, seriously, this has been interesting to listen to. Yes, I have listened to the whole thing. It's 1 AM by the time I send this comment. I will say there are some parts that were a little all over the place. I'd say maybe have a list of things you want to talk about in the possible future episodes. Well, yeah, I do go into this with a list of topics, but they're just very broad topics. So, like, my list for the first one was probably 5 points. It was, what is this show? Can we save Fanime community? Can we save Fanime as a concept? You know, and then, like, it was just the very top of the topics. And that's probably how I'll continue to do it for now. I think I even pointed out, like, usually I'm not that all over the place, but I don't know, my focus was strange that night. But it's a learning process, we'll refine it as we go along. I will say that the name OAS is kind of an interesting name, not gonna lie. It sounds a little better than a name I read on Tumblr recently, and I like the idea of it being alongside with Fanime in the tags. That said, I have a question though. What if the series on YouTube is not really animated in a sense? What if it's in an art style of a motion comic or visual novel? The latter I'm asking for myself, not gonna lie. Would OAS still applies, or it as to be a different type of name? So basically what you're asking is, does a show have to be animated to be considered an original animated series? And by definition of name, you would kind of have to say, I would kind of have to lean toward yes, but at the same time, I mean, Fanime kind of implies that there's animation, and there are plenty of Fanimes that don't. So the thing to remember here is that just to associate with the medium of an original animated series, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to follow some strict set of rules. Nobody's policing it. So if you're doing something that's similar and you want to call it that, you could still do that. There's nothing wrong with that. The trouble is, you know, if you try to broaden the term more to include as much as possible, the term becomes confusing. It loses clarity. It starts to, like, if you don't have that focus anymore, it makes it harder for people on the outside to understand what the term refers to. And we'll talk more about that later. There are some more comments that address this, so we'll continue that. Up until I gave myself a break from it, I've been making content for Fanime as a whole, when making 15 episodes of Nemomia, though I'm sure how people will feel about may vary from person to person, so how people feel about it. Some people may like my weird sense of humor, others may think I need help, but I hope that I inspired some people in that regard. Now, it was a little bit off the side of the main talking point, but yeah, I've watched all of Nemomia, and I have to say, directly to you, Giselle, it's easily my favorite show that you have made. It's very silly and chaotic, as the name implies, but it definitely gives that vibe of just like, almost like cartoonish, almost like Saturday morning cartoonish, just kind of slice of life anime-ish, you know, just the silly things happening in sequence to these characters. Even though it's just, you know, crammed together on a weekly basis and you're the only voice actor, like, I don't know, it worked really well. I think that writing that type of series is possibly a strength of yours that you might explore more. I also highly recommend that a lot of people watch it. I found it to be quite entertaining. I still like to keep the name for Fanime around just for those in our little niche, especially when we have Fanime discords as it is. That said, OAS is a good public name for what we do. Would you talk about other communities that do like series with episodes in them in the near future? I'm a curious being, and while I shall stick with the Fanime community, I'm a curious being and I want to see what they do. Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, I've voiced in tons of like these little silly furry wolf shows and cat shows and things like that. And though it's not necessarily a genre, if you could call it a genre, that appeals to me, generally speaking, there are some really good things over there. There's tons of good content, and I would love to take a look at them, because it's kind of like an untapped resource, you know? it's something that I haven't paid that much attention to, even though I've been involved in it. So I think there could be a lot of fun in discovering what's out there. Also, one more thing, would you also bring up some people's strong feelings about animation memes and storytime animators in general? Because I've seen some corners of animation part of YouTube, and even some people I'm friends with that, well, are not too fond of those communities and what they do. Yeah, that's a talking point, actually, that I plan to use for a future video, because I also have encountered plenty of people who are very anti-meme, very anti-storytime, very anti-mainstream. Anything that, you know, blows up and isn't, like, staunchly creative or, like, super innovative or anything tends to get some backlash, and I think it would be interesting to address that and look at that and see and just see what's up with that. So we'll look into that topic. Thank you, Giselle. All right, next comment's from Shishi Beru. Says, gay, give me more gay. Absolutely. How much gay do you want? Fanime podcast used to be what I turned to when I needed motivation to work on my Fanime, but after repeatedly listening to each one like 5 times, I got tired of it, but I'm super excited for Animation Hour. Thank you very much. I'm glad to have you. I can't believe you listened to the Fanime podcast more than once. I couldn't even listen to some of them once. That's a lie. I had to listen to all of them twice just to edit them. Alright, Otaku Crap, also known as Tenchi Honka, says, to pinpoint all of my thoughts on this topic, I would have to rewatch this several times, which I imagine I wouldn't get around to doing, so here's to summarize some of my thoughts about this sure thing. First, I want to add the discussion of how important saving Fanime is to everyone. I'm probably in the minority here, but I don't think we need to save Fanime. This could be because I couldn't relate to many of the instances when you address the audience as we. Well, I mean, yeah, I kind of mentioned this a little bit in the first video, but we don't necessarily need to save Fanime. Because like I said, I mean, as a community, it's very difficult to make it one entity without making it the closed-off island that no one wants it to be. And as a concept, it's always going to be alive without us anyway. So it's definitely fair to say that we might not necessarily need to save it, or it might not be important to everyone. It's a little silly of me to phrase it that way. So yeah, I can absolutely see what you're saying here. Right, I don't really see myself as much of part of the community anymore. I don't interact with any Fanime discords, only some individuals in and out of those discord groups, which essentially is the community at this point. Since that is the case, I just don't see enough of a benefit with potentially being able to interact with some people I can't relate to at any level through such a great effort. It has become apparent to me that I'm only interested in relatively very select few people in the community. Side note, it's kind of interesting that you start talking about the idea to bring back Fanime without interacting to what's left of the community so much. So I guess this is kind of mentioning like, well, why save something if you don't really have anything invested in it? And that's a good point. That is a very good point. And like I said, for me anyway, it's more about the concept of it. I love, even though I don't relate strongly to every member of the community, I love what the community is, what it represents, and I love what the concept is and represents. So the community, you know, it's a group of amateur creators coming together to support each other and create content that they all can mutually enjoy. And that's something that I really like. And so that to me is worth the effort. Well, it's worth some amount of effort. I did cancel Fanime update. I guess I'm not trying that hard. Anyway, there just doesn't seem like enough reason to actively partake in reviving Fanime, and also there isn't enough drive to either. My luck with talking to the current community and reaching out to new communities is about as bad as my luck with the drop rates and gacha games, which is awful, mind you. Possibly like many, I really don't feel like my content is influential enough to get anywhere. My barely noticed recent uploads, or lack thereof, kind of emphasizes this. Well, that's kind of a tough perspective to challenge, but I will say this, you never want to resign yourself to that perspective. You never really want to say, like, well, my content's not influential enough to get anywhere, because maybe it just hasn't been seen by the right people yet. Another thing I said before was that I think there's really an audience for anything. I mean, you know as well as I do how obscure some things on the internet can be. Like Tails Runner, for example. There's an enduring fan base that now established their own private servers because the game cannot be played outside of its native country. So, you know, there's really an audience for anything. I mean, you even look at your Tails Runner parodies as an example. They have tens of thousands of views on them. So it's understandable if your stuff's not getting seen by as many people as you had wanted, or just not many people in general. But that's, you know, you kind of just have to keep going, promote it as much as possible. Maybe it just hasn't, you know, it just hasn't gotten the right attention yet. Although I will agree with you that I don't know if Fanime is going to get that for you. So, you know, it's everything is on an individual basis. If Fanime is not right for you, then it's understandable that you wouldn't be invested in it. Because obviously, the Fanime fans and Tails Runner fans don't cross over that much. Not that you're still making Tails Runner content, but that's just kind of, as an example, you know. So, yeah, maybe it's just not the right fit. Maybe there is somewhere better. Maybe there's somewhere else to focus your attention, and that's perfectly fine. You've stated the community is sort of fragmented, but a lot of the fragmentation is because of drama. Putting the pieces back together might just make things explode again. It might actually be better to actively not save Fanime because of this, but that's an entirely different discussion altogether. Yeah, that is absolutely a different discussion. That's something I would like to bring up in a future video. Drama and Fanime. That ought to be a fun one. But, it's kind of hard to say how much drama is a threat in the case of putting things back together. I mean, like I had said before, a lot of the fragmentation is just because people have found their friends and they found who they don't necessarily want to be friends with, so they've kind of split off with the people that they actually do like. And that's fine. I just kind of wish that there was more of a general area where we could all interact, because if everybody split off into their own little tribes, then there's less intercommunication. Whereas I much prefer it to be a bit more broad and open. Because personally, I think it's better if drama can happen versus being completely sheltered from it. If we've all split off into our cliques and the cliques don't interact and there is no drama, I mean, drama is not necessarily a bad thing all of the time, because it can raise important issues and we can learn from it. So I don't know, there are multiple sides to that issue. That's a difficult question. Something we'll talk more about. I think your name replacement for Fanime is good. It's like MAP, MEP, PMV, PMV. There are 2 AMV and probably many more, so it's decently likely to stick. Why, thank you. There were plenty of people. Like I said, I'm not 100% confident in it. It was just the first example I came up with, but we'll see if we can refine things. Overall, I suppose you might have a solid plan here, but I just can't be enthusiastic about it in the slightest. Feel free to bring up any of what I put in the discussion later if you want. I do enjoy these discussion videos overall, since they work well to listen to while drawing. And that's the real goal at the end of the day, to make easy listening content, I suppose. But yeah, no, that perspective is fully understandable. I can see why not everyone would be enthusiastic about this the same way. But I do appreciate you even, sticking around and taking the time to write this out, because it does present an opposing view that I think we can maybe learn some things from. I love Lovable False says, I love the idea of this being more about animations instead of just Fanime. Thank you very much. I'm glad to hear that, and I can't wait to see what we get into. Alright, Shribbit says, I laughed so much listening to this. It's great hearing you talk about stuff. It's cool to see where you want to be going, including different animated videos. I'm glad to hear it. Also, I can't believe you put in old Fanime clips. God, that's nostalgic. Thanks for the MGS clip, and man, I was obsessed with the mask girl. I know, it was so great. I'm so proud of her. I know, it's so great, dude. She went to Cal Arts, and like, I never would have thought some little fanimator from YouTube would go to Cal Arts and be successful. Granted, if it was going to be anyone, it was going to be her. Let's be honest. It was going to be Michelle. I say if people want their things to be tagged Fanime, they can do it. I personally wouldn't come back to a Fanime-centric community, and honestly, I never planned to join the deeper community until you had asked me to back in 2014. I generally just make OC content, and I'm happy with that. I just have a good time making random things, and if somebody likes it, then that's cool. But I've never been that concerned with people finding me and watching my videos. I did use Fanime tags, but that was just honestly because I was a soul from the 2008 era and like the title. Perhaps this problem is not a problem I should comment on in general, as I'm content wherever I am. I guess some people want to get more views though, which is okay, but I guess my personality just doesn't care. This was a great listen. Please continue these videos. I believe you can do it. Why, thank you very much. I appreciate that. And yeah, I guess that's completely fair. I mean, if Fanime doesn't serve you in some way, if you're not getting anything out of it and you don't necessarily have a stake in it, so to say, then it's understandable that you just kind of slide off to the side and be adjacent to it. It's just that Fanime is one of those weird things. It's kind of like the blob that ate everything, Anything that's adjacent to it tends to get consumed by it, or at least reached, at least touched by it. It's kind of like I said, I never put Fanime in the title of any of my videos, but by association, they were considered Fanimes, even if I didn't call them that, which, I mean, largely I did, at least in conversation when talking about them, but things would just kind of get grabbed by Fanime. They would latch onto it and say, oh, this Fanime is great, even if you never called it a Fanime. So keep on doing what you do. Keep on making that great OC content. Okay, Ants Animation says, I'm really late to the whole Fanime scene now. I've just been watching Fanimes for at least 4 years ago now. That's how I came across your channel. I haven't watched the whole podcast yet, but to answer the question, I think there's a time and place for things. Fanime did have a time when it was popular by all, but there are only a few people interested now. It never dies until you let it. People can still make Fanime videos if they are passionate about them. Who knows, maybe they can be revived in the next few years. Yeah, I kind of agree with this. like I said before, even if there's no active effort to keep Fanime going, Fanime is going to keep going, or at least, you know, what the concept of it is, which is to say, original animations, people making their own animated shows. Like, that's always going to be a thing, whether or not we're here talking about our Fanime maze. Thanks for your comment. XD Symphony says, I saw one of my characters in the background. That kind of made me happy. My horrible 2007 drawing. God, it's horrible, but I still feel honored. Well, you're very welcome. Thank you for your comment. I need to update that. That's just the Fanime update banner scrolling by in the background, and I made that when I made Fanime update, so it hasn't been updated since like early 2014, and there are so many more things that need to be included in it, but I just like have not had the power. It's such a daunting effort to go through a list of, you know, 400 different shows and cut characters out of each show and put it into a big band. Like, it's just, it would probably take me like 5 to 10 hours just to get it complete again, and I'm so lazy. But someday we'll add more, have some of the newer stuff in there. That'll be nice. Fresh Kill Pile says, I love that you're kind of back making videos, though Fanime Update was what I'm sure many of us enjoyed, gave everyone a push to create more. I fully support you coming back at this different angle. This was a really good, insightful listen. From what I've seen, you've always been passionate, so I look forward to any future videos you make about animation and encompassing topics. Why, thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Yeah, it's definitely kind of hard letting go of Fanime Update. I've always struggled with that because every day that I think about it, you know, anytime I even think about it, I want to bring it back because I just loved what it was, and I hate giving up. I hate canceling things. I hate to just let it go and let it be dead and stay dead. So it pulls on me constantly, and I'm just like, I could be doing this though. But that said, I don't know if it's ever coming back again. Maybe if we get things going fast enough again, and if I just can somehow have the time, then, you know, we'll see what happens. Let's see, Moxie Girl Sophie says, I've been into Fanime since 2010 when I was 11. It's as much of my childhood as anything else. I think to unify more, I don't know, maybe there needs to be some sort of manifesto and some big names, I guess. Maybe shoving it everywhere, making memes based off of inside Fanime jokes that might make people interested, get the animation reviewing community into it maybe. I can imagine it might take off somewhat if someone like Rebel Taxi brought attention to it. I don't actually know who Rebel Taxi is. Let me look that up real quick. Okay, so it looks like some kind of animation-related podcast show. Hey, that's kind of what I'm trying to do. Interesting. I'll have to look into it more to see what that's about. I didn't actually watch any of the videos. But yeah, I mean, more like community-related content would be really good. I think a strong part of what helped spread the community in the early days was that type of stuff. I mean, it's certainly how I was able to find it. I mean, it was a bit easier back in 2010 because the YouTube recommendations were a lot better. Nowadays, my entire sidebar is recommendations that are tailored for me, and it's all like sponsored content, essentially. It's all people that are partnered with YouTube that have added revenue on their content. So whereas previously I would just watch like a Tina Chan 90 video of her silly pogo stick meme, and then the sidebar would be full of all that same meme but made by other people, and that's how I found other like animation channels. That's like how I found Fanime, was through that system. But now, no matter what video I watch, it's going to have the same recommendations in the sidebar just based off of my viewing history, because they want me to watch the videos that are monetized. So that definitely does not do me any favors. That's going to make it a lot harder. But I think interconnected community stuff would be good. Because bringing up Tina Chan 90, I know she did some collab memes. There was one in particular, I think it was the iPod meme that had like 5 other animators in it. And I never would have found some of those people if not for them being in that video. So that type of stuff, yeah, that could be worth looking into. Okay, the Beast says, hello, Evan, glad you're still making these videos that involve Fanime. I know we haven't talked much, but I just want to say hi and wonder how you're doing. Well, I'm doing all right. How are you? And thank you, by the way. I usually think that Fanime should be at least something that people should call the category of their series. A lot of Fanime is usually magical girl themes. I mean, I don't have problems with them since they're adorable and funny. They're just everywhere in the community, but again, I love them. Yeah, magical girl is definitely, I mean, it's what the community was built on, so it's not hard to understand why it's so prevalent. I think when I tallied it up 4 or 5 years ago, it was at least 30 or 40% of all Fanimes were magical girl in some capacity. And a friend actually recently proposed the question of, is it actually a bad thing that Fanime's kind of gotten so far from its roots? Now every show is completely original, some completely new idea. maybe that's why it's having trouble reaching a large audience, because people don't necessarily recognize anything in it. Whereas if you see that someone made their own Tokyo Mew Mew, and you're a Tokyo Mew Mew fan, you might be willing to watch that. But that's a tangent, that's not really related. That's a discussion for another video. Yes, Magical Girl is very prevalent. Looking back at the old Fanime really makes me feel nostalgic that I wish I can go back in time in 2008 and see the glory it had during its years. Yeah, same, I wish I had been there. And where was Evan during the heyday of Fanime?
Get drunk, smoke pot.
Well, we don't talk about that. But that's not the point. What I'm trying to say is that I'm grateful for joining this community to help express myself and develop my story a little bit. I really wish I could have done something in return for you, because Fanime Update introduced people to my series and introduced me to other Fanimes that people made themselves. Well, if you truly feel that way, rest assured, because simply by watching this video, by watching Fanime Update, by commenting, that's really all I could ask in return. That's really all I want in return. The whole goal of Fanime Update was to promote content to people. So to have people actually use it and actually get that service out of it made it worth doing. Like, that was the purpose. Basically, the end goal was the reward. I mean, really just by being here. Because again, like, it was all about bringing people together. It was about making things more visible. So you certainly don't have to do anything for return. You've done enough already. Let me see. I'm not in the Fanime World server anymore, but I'm still in Fanime community, continue making my series. It's sadly downgraded into a comic/story, and I'm still making it to this very day on DeviantArt, Tumblr, and Wattpad. Well, that's totally fine. I mean, I'm pretty sure your series started as a comic, right? Or at least your first series was a comic, so yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. Incidentally, you might even be better off going that route, because webcomics tend to get a lot more visibility than Fanimes do. And at the end of the day, as long as you're telling your story and making what you want to make, then yeah, that's absolutely fine. Don't feel bad about that. I'm glad you're still making videos and talking about the Fanime community. Thank you so much for letting me join this. Oh, you don't have to say it like that. It's not that I let you join. I mean, anybody can join. I'm just glad that people were brought into it. I'm just glad to have been able to help people find it, you know? Because at the end of the day, all I wanted was more people. And that's what I want now. We gotta work on that. We'll see if we can change it somehow. We'll see if we can do anything about that. And Funny Bunny J says, I remember around the time I joined the Fanime community when people were asked how they found out about Fanime, the majority of people found it through Let's Watch videos making fun of Nyan Echo Sugar Girls, but the thing is, those Let's Watch videos died in popularity as soon as the internet started to grow out of its cringe video phase. My theory is that Nyan Echo Sugar Girls, as well as Fanime as a whole, became popular because the internet just happened to want to see cringe things at the time, and Fanime happened to fit the bill. Whether or not Fanime comes back might just depend on a lot on luck, but that's just a theory. A game theory. I've never watched Game Theory. I don't know how they say that, but yeah, that's a valid point. The internet definitely does go through phases, and I have no idea what phase we're in right now. But it's pretty interesting to think that Fanime, when it started back in 2007, 2006, was unironically popular. I mean, there were people that made fun of it, but Tokyo Crystal Mew was on the front page of YouTube at one point in time. Now, it was a lot easier to get on the front page of YouTube back then, but just the fact that something like that could even be there. So this used to be a pretty big deal. And it was largely the type of people making it were the type of people watching it. It was younger girls that liked magical girl shows. And we can see the same kind of thing replicated with Into the Stars. I mean, that's largely what the fan base is for that, or at least was when it started. So even though Fanime definitely seems to gain more quote-unquote cringe popularity than it does genuine popularity, there are audiences out there for genuine stuff. There are genuine audiences for Fanime, and most of them incidentally happen to be magical girl fans. If you really want a Fanime to blow up, just make a serious and good magical girl show. You'll blow up so easily. But yeah, the Let's Watch angle is interesting, because that is true. A lot of people did come from Let's Watch content, which was essentially making fun of Fanime, and then some of those same people ended up making Fanime, and not just making like joke shows and troll shows, just like making actual things that they cared about. So it's kind of interesting. That might be something to look into, see if we can expand that topic more in the future. The thing about making a Fanime that inspires people to make their own is that you can't just force people to start making broadly appealing content. For someone to make an entire animated series, they have to be inspired to do it themselves, so I'm not sure if there's anything we can really do to bring back Fanime in that way besides just trying to make our own Fanime and hope that it inspires people. You could also try to bring back Fanime by focusing on bringing the community together instead of focusing on the Fanime content itself, but Kawaii Ouija already made a whole video on that, so I'm not going to get into that since my comment is already so long. Yeah, that is completely true, and that's kind of why I'm trying to poke people into doing it lately. I'm just like, hey guys, you know, if you want to really bring this thing back, because it's a common topic in the Fanime world group is, well, how do we bring Fanime back? How do we make Fanime great again? But the answer really can be that simple. I mean, there's more to the issue, but it's really just, hey, make some stuff. So I guess if I can just bluntly take that point and hit people over the head with it, I hope I can inspire them to actually do it. Anyway, thanks for your comment. Liquid Garnet says, honestly, you make some good points. I've been calling my review series animation reviews to not put me or thee into a corner when watching and creating the review. I do believe that the name, the scary and negative weight, but not for examples you brought up. You see another tangentially related animation community you didn't bring up is Gacha YouTube, in which animations made by the age range that was the original age range of the Fanime original creators were. They also carry the same stigma that Fanime does as being cringy, unprofessional, and lazily done. The things to my little sister, who sometimes helps me with my YouTube videos, I've actually found some skillfully animated stuff on that community. I've seen the same with the Fanime I've reviewed and scripted and have not put up yet. So the real question is, why do gacha animations flourish while this community that at one point produced similar material, at least story-wise, has shrank as much as it has? Well, before I continue, I want to say I don't know if gacha is necessarily comparable to Fanime, because there are people that make gacha series, but gacha is just like, it's just a little dress-up game, right? Basically. It's kind of like Gaia Online in a sense, and people used to make Gaia shows back in the day, and again, we never really associated them with Fanime because it's an entirely different scene. It's kind of like how people make sim shows. Remember sim shows? Are those still around? But again, yeah, you're using an engine, a game engine, to create some kind of show. It's a little bit different from what we're doing. It's also a lot more accessible because everybody's got that. Because you don't have to necessarily be able to animate to do that. You don't even have to be able to draw. So it's a little bit of a different beast. I don't know if I would compare the two. Well, let's continue. The only answer that I can think of is gacha allows for a consistent art style that was made by professionals across all products that are made in their community, while Fanime or OAS takes a risk and makes themselves vulnerable by using their own art styles. Truthfully, I haven't been active in this community until late 2017. I believe true, even though I was aware of its existence and wanted to make an animated series since the 2009s, I was given the advice by a fanimator at the time that I looked up to but was no longer active, saying that'll be better for me to go into fan fiction and really think about what I wanted to do as creative before posting anything on YouTube. I did, and I'm not ashamed of that path, though I feel like I missed a lot of experiences that would have benefited me in my visual art than focusing solely on writing. Yeah, I definitely would disagree with that advice. No offense to you or that person that told it to you, but yeah, I would strongly disagree with that. Anyway, there's a lot to dissect here. Yeah, the consistent art style of gacha thing definitely is a part of what makes it so accessible and why so many people are doing it. But again, I don't think I wouldn't compare that to Fanime at all. I think those two things go in separate categories. We could potentially learn something from them. It might be interesting to look into what they're doing someday. That'll be a topic for a video sometime. We'll take a look at gacha and explore that side of things. But yeah, I don't know if it necessarily relates to Fanime. But maybe it does. Maybe we'll find that out when we check it out sometime. I'll look at that in the future. But yeah, the thing about animating and making like animations, making shows, making episodes is that it's really something that you benefit from having experience in. Because there are so many things that can go wrong, so if you take the crash course and you make all those mistakes and then learn from them, you kind of refine your own product over time. And yeah, you can learn those skills from other sources. You don't necessarily have to jump into animating right away, but I think it's better to just do it. Honestly, despite the misconceptions and talk of algorithms when it goes for the art and animation communities of YouTube, I feel like it's the most viable out of anything you can post on YouTube, and there's a lot of talk about in that regard. I'm a sucker for creativity, especially when it's done at the bottom of somebody's heart, and when somebody starts a creative project, even if it's one I don't personally enjoy, I really hope for the best of luck. Yeah, I would definitely disagree with that too. I don't think that creative work on YouTube is the most viable, because you're sinking a lot of resources into something that may not get as many views as something that someone spent much less time on. So that's the thing with YouTube. The most viable type of content is the content that can be made with the least effort and at the lowest cost. So if you're vlogging, for example, all you're doing is sitting in front of a webcam talking. You might record yourself doing something that you're going to do anyway, like going to the store, going shopping, or something like that, but the level of effort is relatively low, and then you sit down and you might edit it and then post it on YouTube. So if you record a 10-minute vlog and then you spend an hour editing it, you've spent an hour and 10 minutes, you got your completed video, you could post it that same day, get as many views as it gets, and then you could do the same thing tomorrow, the next day. To make a 10-minute animation, you might spend months. So it really, like, it's definitely not the most viable. I think that creative work on YouTube has a lot of potential. I think that it doesn't benefit us to sit down and say, oh, well, the algorithm's against us, so we shouldn't even try. Like, we definitely, like, have to rise to the challenge, which I know you didn't say that. I'm just in general. But yeah, the odds really are always going to be stacked against animation on YouTube. That's just the way that YouTube is. All right, Lauren Turner says, I wasn't really involved in the Fanime community, so I don't know to how much I can speak about it. In college, I had two interests, animation and video games. When it came to animation, I became interested in Fanime, but over a short time, I found a lot lacking in terms of community and collaboration. So I eventually went back to games thanks to its strong community structure. Not to say the Fanime community had a bad structure, it just wasn't appealing to me. If you want a Fanime hub of sorts, then I think you would have to decide how broad of a community you want. The video game community, for example, is big, and the more specific you get, the smaller the community will be, like with game communities based around specific softwares. Unfortunately, the more specific something gets, the more exclusive or restrictive it will seem from the outside. I felt this a lot as I tried to get into making my own series, so people involved in Fanime may need to decide if they want to be just animated content or just anime-styled animation content, etc. What areas do you feel comfortable being broad with, and which do you not? Yeah, that is a very good point. We could even look back at the previous discussion. We talked about gotcha stuff. I mean, would you include that under the umbrella? Personally, I wouldn't, but someone else might. So I guess the term does kind of have to be defined to some extent, which is a large part of the problem right now, is just that the term Fanime has no definition. Like, everybody does not agree necessarily on what it means and what can and can't count as Fanime. So yeah, that's something that needs some figuring out. It needs some refinement. Based on what you mentioned, there seems to be a sustainability problem. After a popular Fanime, there is a rise in creation, but eventually dies down before another inspiring show comes out. It may help to see what encourages people to move on. Does interest simply die down, or does Fanime simply no longer offer something to artists as they grow? That's just speculative, but perhaps a strong community would help keeping things going after things get big. Yeah, you definitely have a point there. You're definitely onto something with that. Does Fanime simply no longer offer something to artists as they grow? I think that is a very strong question to ask. I think we could make a whole video based on that question, because that really is something that comes up a lot. I mean, most people that start shows, especially ones that succeed, just kind of slap it together in the beginning and just don't really give it their all, or otherwise their all is very low leveled and it's easy. Like, you could look at something like Diamond Mew Mew. I mean, the first 3 episodes I think all came out within a week. They were relatively short, and there were just a few pictures, and they weren't very well drawn pictures, so it's just something that a kid spent a few hours on, right? But by the time that show ended, by the time it was canceled, I mean, it was like Kaz's best effort. It was much more quality art. I mean, it had line art, shading, and all of that, and there was even some amount of animation. So by the time, like, you know, episode 1 may have been made in 3 hours, episode 13 probably took a year. I mean, it could have taken months to make. So if you reach that point where you can't do your best in a realistic amount of time, it might be enticing to move on. You might say, well, I'm never going to be able to make this as good as I want to make it because it's just going to take too long. Maybe I need to look elsewhere. Yeah, that's an interesting question to ask. That's something we need to look at, for sure. In terms of names, I think you were on the right track. I think OA would be appropriate. OC is widely used for original character, so OA could be for original animation. If you want to be broad, and perhaps OAA for original animation. If you want to be specific, so a video could be my OAA series. Perhaps even OA anime for originally animated anime. Yes, these are all very valid ideas. I guess OA would be good for stuff that's not a series. Maybe something that's like a one-off. Because otherwise you could just call that like a short or something. You wouldn't necessarily need to use OAS or some equivalent. Yeah, those are all very good points though. Thank you for that comment. It has opened my mind in some ways. It's definitely broadened the discussion. I think there's a lot to talk about there. Let's see, Nihilist says, I didn't expect to see an upload, but glad you're back. Can't wait to get back into animation. Thank you very much. I'm glad to see you here. Karma12100 says, it was nice listening to this while I animate. I do feel the troll Fanime sort of ruined Fanime for the view of new people joining. Yeah, I would kind of agree with that to an extent, because then there becomes this problem of there are a lot of people that actually can't tell what's trolling and what's not. There are a lot of people that think Nyaneko Sugar Girls is serious. There are a lot of people that think Blood Raining Night is serious. They don't realize that those are troll shows. And so it kind of begs the question of, can these people separate a troll show from a show that's just not that skillfully made? And if not, I mean, that really might hamper the reputation. Sure, NNSG helped start Fanime, but over time more and more troll Fanimes have been coming out, which made people think that's all Fanime was, just a big troll community. It turned my friend off from Fanime, and at this point he doesn't even consider my work Fanime anymore. He'd rather just call it anime. Yeah, that's valid. I mean, realistically speaking, Fanime has a terrible reputation, and that's why people tend to separate themselves from it, so I can see why someone would separate the quote-unquote true Fanimes from kind of like the trolly stuff that's out there. True Fanime. God, I can't believe I just said that. Good lord.
Smoke pot.
I don't mind if Fanime comes back. I honestly thought it was fun for a short time while I was a part of it. I'll keep working on my series since it's something I'm passionate about and something I wanted to do way before I knew anything about Fanime, but it's really nice to hear your voice, Fanime, again, Evan. Maybe one day something new will start. Well, thank you very much. Yeah, I would love to see something kind of bounce back a little bit in this regard. I would love to see more of a community spring up again. I feel like maybe I'm just going through my midlife crisis. I'm trying to grasp too hard at my glory days, but man, mid-2014, what a summer that was. I know we can never bring that back, but if we could just recreate that vibe somehow, it would be amazing. So, Tenchi Honka TR, hey! Says, here's an idea, singular OWE, original web episode, plural, OWS, original web series. Yes, OWE and OWS because making art hurts. Also, I guess like ow, owie, and ow. Yes, valid. So someone else mentioned this in another comment, and I'll address it in that next comment, actually. So next up is Universal Fiction. Man, I love this. I really look forward to more. In the next one, I would really like to hear what makes a series good, maybe review some series, or just reply to comments. I don't know. I'll listen to anything. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, I actually have plans to talk about those specific topics in separate videos, so I might touch on them in the Animation Hour podcast itself, but I do want to do like separate videos for reviews. I'd like to review really just all kinds of stuff. And I also I want to do a series looking at what makes a show good, like what are some compromises you can make, what's the best way to make a show with the resources that we've got. That's a topic I would really, really love to expand upon and just kind of ramble on about. Alright, let's keep going. And I want to comment on 3 things: the need for good content, renaming the community, concept of Fanime, and the Discord. Alright, this is going to be good. I personally think that good content isn't that important. I might define good content differently. I do think that there needs to be more content, but that it isn't the most important thing. I think all we need is finished content. I think the reason why so many people have lost interest and faith in the community and concept of Fanime is because nothing gets finished, because so many people give up. People looking from the outside can come to the conclusion that making their own series is impossible when it really isn't. Even if the series is 2 episodes, just tell the whole story. Now, this is a very valid point, and I definitely agree with that for the most part. If we could get more things finished, that would benefit everyone. Now, sometimes you have these novelty shows like Blood Raining Night, for example. I would call it a novelty show. Sugoi Quest for Kokoro is a novelty show. Both very popular shows didn't get finished, but they weren't really building toward anything. They weren't really telling a story that needed to be finished. It's easy to just take an episode out of context and say, wow, this is ridiculous and wacky and fun, and I can enjoy this. But when it comes to more serious stuff, it definitely is important that we're getting more stuff finished, because it's really hard to get invested in a story that has no conclusion, unless it's designed to have no conclusion. But most Fanime, I think, is not designed that way. So, for example, if you have the best episode 1 ever, it's a fantastic episode, it sets up your series perfectly, and everybody can't wait to see where it's going. If it never has an episode 2, then you're not gonna get very far with that, because I mean, what is there to say about a pilot that has no finale? You wouldn't watch, the first half of a movie. You wouldn't watch the first act of a movie and just turn it off and never finish it, and then still hold that movie dear to your heart, right? So yeah, I'm phrasing this very badly. I'm coming up with bad examples, I think, but I fully understand what you're saying here, and I definitely agree that finishing content is really important. And that's part of what makes My Jungle Book Your Year so good. Because like I said before, I mean, it had a pretty decent viewing pool as it was uploading, but it wasn't until after it finished that I really started to see the fan base for it. That I really started to see posts about it, news about it, things like that. And I mean, people cosplay that show. Now, arguably, that's the type of series where the ending doesn't necessarily have to be there because it's relatively episodic, but it helps. It very, very much helps. Good Lord, that's 3 for 3, 3 bad examples. I've struck out. I'm gonna just cut that whole segment. No, I agree. Just finish content. Very good, very good. I agree with Tenchi that OWS is better than OAS. If you renamed Fanime to OAS, you exclude stuff like Into the Stars, Terror Girls, Project Unknown, Hybrid Heroes, etc. Animation isn't really necessary to make a series, and using OAS might discourage those who don't animate. I think that the expectation of needing animation is one of the main things that is killing the community at the moment. There are so many perfectionists, and I get that they want to make the best thing they can make, but like you said, it doesn't have to be. That's why OWS is best to include casual animators and non-animators. Do you know what webtoons are? No, I don't. Oh, so it's like a motion comic. Okay, interesting. If people started using YouTube to make a voice version of their comics/webtoons, it can fall under the OWS category. I bring webtoons up because it's super popular right now. Without the expectation of needing animations, the community could easily grow by recruiting people from that community. Yes and no. I definitely think we need to broaden the horizons more, like need to broaden things out more so that more people can kind of fall into it. I don't necessarily think web series is the best name. See, original web series, so Tenchi brought this up, or original web episode, either or. I don't really think that's good because that's too broad. You know, anything on YouTube could really be called a web series, right? Someone's vlog could be called a web series. Someone's let's play could be called a web series. Someone's, you know, documentary could be called a web series. So it's a little bit too broad. It's kind of like how every cartoon on TV is a TV show, but not every TV show is a cartoon, right? So we kind of have to have that distinction. If Fanime is a cartoon, then we can't call it the TV show Community, you know, because then it's a little bit too broad. So I like where you're going with that. I definitely think broadening it out more is good, but we don't want it to be too broad. The idea is that it's not too specific, but it's specific enough that people kind of know what it is. People kind of know what it's going to be, right? And yeah, it's an interesting topic, animation and Fanime, because there definitely are those shows, like you pointed out, that don't really have animation, or just outright don't have animation at all, that still fall under the Fanime category, even though they're not animated. That's an interesting thing. I really don't know how to address that topic, though, because it's kind of something that's circumstantial. I mean, if someone makes Project Unknown and says, well, I'm going to call this a Fanime, even though it's not animated, there's not really much to say about that. I mean, is there anyone saying, well, this isn't a Fanime, it's not animated? I don't feel like, I don't know, some people seem to get the impression that that restriction is there, but it's never been there, so I don't know. But yeah, I guess having animation in the name might kind of fuel that even further, but I'm not really sure what you would do about that, because animation really is the focus at the end of the day. I mean, yes, storytelling is probably paramount. I would say that's like the top of the pyramid is the storytelling, but it's storytelling through a visual medium. So maybe if we said original visual series, like OVS or something along those lines, that might be good. I don't know, something to think about, something to speculate on. I think there's room for that discussion to continue. Alright, lastly, I think the Fanime World Discord needs to change completely. I think it should be more general. I think it should be a Discord for artists, MAP makers, meme makers, and OWS makers. The best community to advertise OWS is other artists and creators. The creators in each community will naturally gain an interest in other communities because it's in the same server, and hopefully they will try to make an OWS. It's good that there are only like 10 active members in the current Fanime Discord. It's way easier to change with a smaller group just because we all know what's going on. Fanime Discord, definitely could be opened up a bit more, I would say, because at this point we're calling it the Fanime Discord, but how often do people talk about Fanime? I mean, yes, it's the thing that's tying us together. It is mentioned, but yeah, the thing with Fanime World is that we definitely, I think it definitely could stand to be a little bit more broad, but we don't want it to be too broad at the same time. Because if the focus of the whole group is Fanime, then we want that to still be the case. Otherwise, it becomes no different from any other art community, and that's kind of diluting it a bit. I guess what I'm saying is Fanime should be the reason that people are coming to that group, because that's what the group is mainly focused on. But I guess counter to that point, I think a good alternative would be finding ways to bring Fanime to other groups, because there are plenty of like general art groups out there. that are just like welcome to all art, all animation, stuff like that. And if there could be more of a Fanime presence there, then it could funnel back more toward the Fanime side of things. So yet again, I find myself saying, like, yeah, I kind of agree with you, kind of disagree with you at the same time. I don't know. I guess I don't think that it should be made too general, because there is a common theme with Fanime, and we do want to try and maintain that. But on the other hand, I'm not sure. I haven't had a good response to any one of your points. I apologize. I don't know. I guess that means I need to think more about it. I'll work on that, I guess. Alright, MelodyFan12 says, your passion for animation is so great. Actually got through an animation just listening to this. Oh, that's awesome. I get the age thing now. I'll be 25 next month. RIP. Great to see that all animations will be included. Feels really sad to log on and see nothing these days. Keep it going. Fanimation can be revived, I'm sure. Wow, I had no idea I was the same age as MelodyFan12. That's crazy. That means you were making Eternal back when I was... Well, we don't talk about that. Anyway, I'm really glad to see that you're still out there. I feel like you're such an iconic figure at this point. It's super cool that you're still around and you're still animating. Thank you very much for that comment. Miss Lady Meringue says, still watching, but I do miss a lot of the aspects of what Fanime was in 2014. At the end of the day, I just miss talking to a lot of friends I made during that time that decided to go into different directions, and it's harder and harder to find a good reason to talk to these people without the crutch of a group setting. I would love to connect to these people alongside other new people with a video making, animation, original series interests. Honestly, preferably people who are 18 to 20 plus, just for the sake of not feeling very comfortable talking to a large group of minors. Yeah, fully understandable. Like I described, I'm kind of in a similar boat. I would definitely love to try and recapture some of that 2014 magic somehow, but I don't know how to do it. Nostalgia is such a double-edged sword. If anyone's planning on starting a group along those lines or have already started an active server related, I would love for someone to reach out. Same, sign me up. Also, maybe it would be cool to include story-based OC content that includes series and episodes that would reach a wider audience, because I know a lot of people who make animation memes of their personas, friends' personas, but also we could target people who love writing stories and creating OCs in a video format. Maybe going under the name OCC, original character content, would be a good idea. Yeah, that could be interesting. I actually don't know what you're talking about here. What is, who love writing stories and creating OCs in a video format? Like, I've never really seen that. If you've got examples of that, send it to me, because I'm very curious. Cinepie just said gay. Well, gay is fine. Arctic Ukami says, just turned 26, got into the community around 14-ish years ago. Vibrates with nostalgia. Yep. 14 years ago. That's a long, long time. Wait a minute. No, you didn't. You're lying to me. 14 years ago was 2005. I mean, I guess there was stuff in 2005. Just not very much. There was like Me at the Zoo, the OG Fanime. See, Mango Lee says, I don't really have any sort of relationship with Fanime anymore, so I don't have any input in terms of like where things should go or the current community, but damn do I have opinions on the time I spent with it. The biggest issue I had with Fanime is how there was such a small push toward improvement. My art actually got worse when I joined the community, and has only started to improve again after distancing myself. Criticism seemed to be very frowned upon. Let me see, I'm happy with the friends I made through Fanime, but it did nothing but hurt my artistic growth, so I definitely look at it with a bit of regret. Now this I can absolutely relate to. I fully understand where you're coming from, because I'm in the same situation. So I briefly mentioned criticism in the first animation hour. I did say I'm going to be talking about that subject more in the future. I'd like to dedicate probably a whole video to it. But yeah, I essentially ran into the same type of situation wherein I found recently, actually, at the very end of 2018, I put together a bunch of my art over the years into a giant timeline to try and see how much I had improved. I wanted to compare art over the years from me. And what I noticed was that from 2012 to probably about 2016, my art really didn't improve at all. Not only did I stagnate like completely during those years, but there were at least 3 out of those 4 years where I didn't even create any like actual finished art. All I really had was just Fanime related stuff. And because I was putting so much of my time toward just trying to push episodes out, I was putting all my focus on that. I had kind of lost I'd kind of stopped caring about quality as much. I wasn't pushing the boundaries of art because all my creative energy was going toward trying to make an episode. Now, granted, for me, it was a little bit different. I wasn't making an episode that was like, I wasn't making a show that was high skill. So basically all my artistic energy was going toward a show that was never meant to look good. And so my focus on quality completely disappeared. And thus I did not improve artistically for 4 years. So it wasn't really, I don't know. So it's slightly different from what you're saying here about criticism. But yeah, I understand falling into that trap of there being no standards. That's an important thing with the Fanime community, is that there really are no standards. We pretty much welcome everything with open arms, which is good in some ways and bad in others. And I definitely think criticism is something that we need more of around here. We just, like, there needs to be a little bit more openness in that. Criticism it's kind of like discipline in a sense. You know, it's something that you don't like it when you get it, but you'll be thankful for it later on. Because at the end of the day, it teaches you a lesson. If it's good criticism, that is. There is absolutely such a thing as bad criticism. Don't get me wrong, but the important thing is being able to take criticism in general, just being able to take it at all, and also being willing to give it. There seems to be this fear, especially in the Fanime community. Nobody wants to be hated. Nobody wants to be disliked. No one wants to come off as a meanie, as a big meanie. So people don't criticize art that they probably could. But again, I mean, you kind of have to point these things out. I mean, an artist might not realize that they drew the hands backward or something like that. And if you point it out to them, they'll probably pay more attention to it in the future. So again, it may sting in the moment to hear, oh, this picture basically sucks. But then you reevaluate yourself and, I don't know, you could learn from it. There's value in it. Yeah, so totally understand where you're coming from. That is definitely a problem with the community that we have. It's not a problem with Fanime in general, since Fanime is such a general concept. But with the current community that we have, that's something that really needs to be addressed in some way. Thank you for that comment. Now, there's one last comment to read. This one's a big one. There's going to be a lot to discuss here. So, Mizzy Luna says, I no longer consider myself part of the Fanime community, so this is my opinion as just an animator rather than a fanimator, so feel free to take this with a grain of salt. Fanime's biggest weakness, in my opinion, was the need for it to be united under one flag. While it wasn't exclusive, it was incredibly insular. It was a feedback loop and echo chamber of similar content that never seemed to grow or change over the years. In fact, I recall times where more popular works would be absolutely trashed by the community, myself included. It was truly stifling and toxic. Yes, that is absolutely true. There was absolutely a lot of disdain and jealousy for more popular works, which actually is somewhat related to the previous comment from Mango Leaf, which is part of the no criticism, low standards thing. When something came along that was high standards, people on the other end of the spectrum making the lower standard content would often, you know, just throw stones at it and say, well, blah, 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 why does this deserve so many views? Why doesn't my thing get views, etc.? Which is just absolutely the wrong approach. I mean, when you look at a show that's just really well made, what, I guess I can't say the correct response, but probably the best response is to look at it and be inspired by it. That's how I've always liked to approach it. I mean, Mizzy Luna, as an example, she is now a professional animator. And that's not hard to believe when you look at how much effort she used to put into her YouTube animations. I mean, they're a bit dated by now, but if you look at the work that was done on Terra Lucis, you can see that passion there. You can see the standards were pretty much as high as they could be. And there are some people that really got up in arms about that like almost seemed to get offended that it was getting attention when it was worked so hard on. I mean, I just don't get it. It's strange. And personally, I always saw it as an opportunity for inspiration. It's easy to look at something that someone's made that they've poured themselves into and made the best that they can make and say, well, dang, I want to be that good. And that's really the, like, at least from my perspective, I think that's the best response. And that's another thing with Fanime is, like, alongside criticism, competition has also kind of not been present, which is strange to me, and I wish it were more prevalent. Because competition makes everything better. Competition is how improvements are made. Let me tell you about capitalism. But no, let's not. But, you know, it's really important. So the lack of competition is kind of how we end up in these situations. It's how we end up with people looking at popular content and saying, yeah, well, that doesn't deserve to be popular. I wish I was that popular, instead of saying, oh, I'm coming for you. You know, I don't know. It's strange. Anyway, let's continue. When I stopped associating with Fanime and began looking to the internet animation community as a whole, I was absolutely boggled at how far animation could be taken by amateurs, people who were 14 or 15 doing animation work that had far surpassed me in my early 20s, people who were starting to collaborate with studios in Japan or with bigger projects in the West, and reanimates that had such a broad sense of style and skill, like something the Fanime community never had. My idea of what amateur animation could be truly underestimated its potential. Obviously, everyone has their own motives for creating an animated series. Not everything has to push the bar in terms of animation or art quality. However, even in terms of story variety, it was eye-opening to see what sort of comics and web animations were out there. This I would also agree with. Yes, you're absolutely right. There's so much out there, and it scares me. It's terrifying. It's honestly really hard to look at the animation community on, like, Twitter, for example, and see just how good some of these people are. Whereas I'm out here struggling to make memes, and it's really lit a fire underneath me, and now I feel like I need to improve very quickly because I have been left behind. I'm like 5 years behind. I need to catch up fast. And again, that pressing threat is something that Fanime just does not feel the effects of, and I guess part of broadening the horizons would hopefully bring that in more. Like, if we can get more people involved, or at least become aware of more people, do you know what I mean? Then maybe there'll be that push. But yeah, no, I know exactly what you're talking about. I relate strongly. Now, in terms of story variety, that's really interesting, and yeah, I guess I can kind of see what you're saying with that too, because Fanime is very trend based. I mean, it started out as Magical Girl pretty much exclusively, and it kind of drifted towards slice of life in the My Jungle Book era. Now it's kind of drifting back toward Magical Girl, but only a little bit. And yeah, I guess when you think about it, a lot of them, maybe it's just because the stories never get developed, so we never really get to see much of them, but it's usually high school kids doing high school kid things, and then something interrupts their life. No matter what the story is, that's typically the premise. That's usually the basis, the foundation that it's built upon. And there is much more potential out there than that. So yeah, I absolutely see where you're coming from. It's my opinion that Fanime doesn't need to associate under one banner. Figuring out a tag, I actually think original animated series is nice, so that people can find work they want to consume is great, but I don't believe in gathering everyone together in one place. The MAP and furry animation communities are scattered far and wide, with clicks inside clicks inside clicks. What brings them together is the content they consume, but they don't necessarily all associate with one another at all times. It also encourages reaching outside their community. For example, off the top of my head, I know there are a few multi-animator project artists that cross with the community of storyboard artists in LA. Also, I absolutely squirmed at the Terra Lucha's clips. I enjoyed the nostalgia trip with everything else, though. Yeah, dude, Terra Lucha's, the old, like, clips from it look so dated now. I remember when they came out, and I just thought, like, oh my god, these are amazing. But now I look at it, and I'm just like, oh wow, Arena is way better than this now. Like, oh my goodness. Just seeing how Iluna's head, like, completely shifts volumes as she turns Sword Quest. There's so much, it's just like, oh wow. But I guess it's a good thing, it means you've come a long way. Anyway, this is the point that I really wanted to talk the most about, because it's really a counterpoint to a lot of what I said in the previous video, and it's pretty much correct. Like, it fully counters my argument. You win the game, you get the tangy cheddar squares, you sleep in the big bed tonight. So what you're saying is, like, yeah, these other communities, they don't have one central place that they funnel into, which is something that I was trying to push for Fanime. I was saying, like, we should all funnel into one place. There should be somewhere for Fanime to go, for Fanime to meet. And you're saying, well, no, you don't necessarily need that. And you're 100% correct. And the reason I'm so ashamed that you're correct is because I should have seen this. Like, there's no reason for me to have not brought this up. I mean, I use the furry communities, the MAP communities, the meme communities as an example when discussing other topics, but neglected to mention that, yes, they do not have central meeting points. I even looked for them when I was getting into those communities. I tried to find, you know, groups dedicated to animation memes. They don't really exist. I tried to find groups dedicated to, like, you know, just all that stuff, and there really aren't any. I mean, if you look for Discords for memes as an example, all you'll really find are Discords dedicated to specific channels. So like Rosali has a Discord, Stariot has a Discord, Wolfie Chew has a Discord, but they're not linked together, and they're not even really focused on memes. It's just kind of like a, I don't want to say fan club, but kind of. And though there is some crossover between those groups, there are people that are in like multiple groups of that nature. Those groups don't necessarily associate with each other. So you're pretty much refuting my entire argument about unifying Fanime, and you're pretty much correct. I can't really disagree. I can't really argue against it. I guess it just kind of leaves the question as, well, what do you do, where do you go from there, if that is the case? And that I don't really have an answer for, but well, I suppose summing up that paragraph, like if we could get a successful tag going, if we could get the tag living, if we could get a better name than Fanime and have that thing spread out, branch out, and be a known entity, then the rest of the community stuff wouldn't matter. Basically, it would just be on a circumstantial basis. It would be like, well, if people wanted to make a group, they could, but there wouldn't need to be one central place as long as the tag was alive. Which I probably should have reached that conclusion anyway, since I was already saying previously that, well, I don't know if we can unify the community. What's really important is that we just get the content popular again. So I was like halfway to what you're saying, but I just didn't quite make it. I'm really glad you made this comment, because this clarifies a lot. This is important. Kind of makes me miss the old podcast format more, just how easily you're able to completely snipe my argument and say, no, you're wrong. Maybe you should be hosting this thing. Anyway, that was very, very interesting. I'd like to thank everybody one more time for all of those responses. There's so much. And hopefully I didn't ramble too much and contradict myself too much, but did my best to respond to everything. So next animation hour will probably be coming out in like a week or so. I don't know, just whenever I decide to make it. I haven't actually figured out what I want to talk about yet. But I've got some other things that I'd like to work on as well for this channel. So we'll see what ends up happening. Thanks everybody for hanging out. I'll look forward to doing more in the future. Have a nice day.
Light up our bongs and watch the smoke touch the ceiling. Hot summer night. Actually, it's winter. Or maybe it's spring. I don't know, it's $7.